Okay, welcome everyone. So let's get started. So today we will kind of consider a one-off topic, but a very interesting topic, very important for the foundations of cryptography. It's known as secret sharing schemes. How to share a secret. That was the title of the original paper, which sort of started this line of inquiry. The paper was by Adi Shamir. Shamir is also the S in RSA. And the question is as follows. So suppose maybe coming to the modern times. So suppose you have a lot of sensitive data and you would like to store this data securely on a cloud, right? So one option is, of course, you go ahead, hire a cloud, and then just put your data all on the cloud, right? But this data is sensitive, and maybe you don't trust the cloud provider, right? This data might have your business secrets and so on, and you just don't want to reveal this data to anybody. So here, one option is you can encrypt the data and you can just store the encrypted data on the cloud. But then the question is, where do you store the key, right? You don't have any reliable storage and things like that, right? So one option is rather than hiring a single cloud provider, you can hire like multiple cloud providers, right? And you can break your data into several parts and store like one part on each cloud provider. Okay. And the question is, how do you break the data into several parts, right? So one option is maybe your data is a 1 GB long file. So you hire like 10 cloud providers, and the first 10% goes to the first one, second 10% goes to the second one, and so on, right? So there's something which is clearly wrong with that, in that every cloud provider can see some significant chunk of your data, right? You don't want that. So the question is it possible for me to break my data into several shares, right? And store one share on each cloud such that neither cloud provider gets any information about my data at all. Okay. So this is known as a secret sharing scheme. So here, the idea is you want to break your secret. So let's denote the secret by S into, let's say, N shares. Okay, and there are various types of secret sharing schemes depending upon the reconstruction requirements. So, of course, no single cloud provider gets access to your data, but how do you recover your data at a later point, right? So one option is maybe you have to go to all the N cloud providers and you have to recover all the shares, and only then you get back the original data. So this is known as an N out of N secret sharing scheme. Another variant is called a threshold secret sharing scheme. Threshold means that maybe you set a threshold T, and as long as you have T out of these N shares, any T out of these N shares, you will be able to recover your data. So we will consider both of these in the class today. So let's start with the simpler case, which is N out of N secret sharing, much easier to construct and simple to understand. So let me define now N out of N secret sharing. Okay. And any N out of N secret sharing scheme must specify two algorithms. The first algorithm is known as the share algorithm. So note that in secret sharing schemes, there's no key, nothing like that. There's just a secret, and then there are shares of the secret. So the share algorithm takes your secret S. This algorithm must be probabilistic polynomial time. And this algorithm must output S1, S2 up to Sn. These are N shares of the secret S. The second is the reconstruction algorithm. Given the shares, how do you get back your original secret? So reconstruct, and this takes as input some n shares, right? This is polynomial time, and this outputs the secret S. Okay, so simple, just two algorithms. And then there are two requirements which these algorithms must satisfy. First, as you can expect, is the correctness requirement, which is that, you know, I take my share, I take my secret, I use the share algorithm honestly to get several shares, and then I reconstruct, I should get back the same secret which I started with. Okay, so correctness just says the following: the probability that reconstruct of S1 up to Sn equals S such that S1 up to Sn are the result of share of S, and this probability is just 1. This should hold for every secret S. Okay. The second requirement is, of course, the more interesting one, which is the security requirement. And it says the following: if you don't have all the shares, then you cannot reconstruct the secret. In fact, you get no information about the original secret. So by the way, what does this n out of n stand for? So the first parameter is how many you needed for reconstruction, and this is how many shares you have. Okay, so this first one means that you need n shares for reconstruction. The second one means that the total number of shares is n. And n out of n means you need all the shares for reconstruction. So security is actually defined in a very similar way compared to the encryption schemes. So in encryption schemes, we say the following, that you look at ciphertext, two different ciphertexts, the first one encrypting M0, another one encrypting M1, and they should look the same, right? So here what we will say is that you look at n minus 1 shares, right? In the first case, they are coming from S0. In the second case, they are coming from S1, and they should look the same. Okay, so let me just, to be consistent with the notation in the notes, for every S and S prime, these are our two different secrets. And for all subsets I, so I is a subset of n such that the size of the subset equals n minus 1. What is this subset? This subset is the subset of shares that the adversary has. Okay, so adversary can have n minus 1 or less than n minus 1 shares. And the guarantee that we need is the following. You look at all the shares as I in this subset. Okay. such that S1 to Sn is coming from share S. This distribution should be the same or maybe computationally indistinguishable. And here now the shares are coming from the secret S prime. Okay. Now here I am writing these two distributions are the same. That's a strong definition. Computational indistinguishability also looks fine. So there's a question, why don't we have I and I prime? I mean, if you have I and I prime and they are different, I can immediately distinguish this from this, right? Just by checking which set of shares is this. So one way of thinking about it is like, let's say out of my 10, let's say 9 cloud providers are dishonest and they are trying to recover my trade secret, right? So in both the cases, the same 9 cloud providers are different. And to these cloud providers, these 9 cloud providers, they cannot tell if my secret is S or S prime. So that's sort of the guarantee that we have. Right? Considering different I doesn't really make much sense here. Any other questions? And the reason I put exact equality is because we can actually achieve exact equality. There's no cryptographic assumptions, no factoring, no discrete log. It's a purely information theoretic construction, unconditionally secure. So the nice thing is, even if later somebody proves that P equals NP, secret sharing is one of the things which would still be alive in cryptography. Okay, so now let's look at how we might be able to construct N out of N secret sharing. So it's a really simple construction. Whenever we see sets in cryptographic proof, we can assume that all items are labeled and an adversary can distinguish between them. Yeah, I'm not saying that the shares are labeled or they are not labeled, but they may be labeled, right? For example, if I am the ith cloud provider, maybe I know that I am the ith cloud provider. Maybe I can even put my name as part of the share. Yeah, I think in some sense, part of this question will be answered when we look at Shamir secret sharing. So in this N out of N secret sharing, it doesn't really matter which set the shares are coming from. You don't need to know the set. I mean, in fact, anyway, you need all the shares, right? So the set doesn't really matter. On the other hand, in Shamir secret sharing, which is the threshold secret sharing, we will see later on that you need to know the index actually. Okay, so let's look at the construction. So any thoughts on how a construction might work?
It's something to do with polynomials, and I don't remember all the details.
Well, you don't even need that for, yeah, good. somebody is answering XOR, which is exactly what we will do. So the basic idea here is that you pick n minus 1 shares completely at random, and the last one is picked so that the XOR of all of them is equal to your secret. Okay, so the construction is the share algorithm works as follows. It takes as input, of course, the secret, right? Pick S1 to Sn minus 1 from U size of the secret. And then set Sn to be S XOR S1 XOR Sn minus 1. Now, how do you reconstruct? You're given S1 to Sn. You just output the XOR of all of these. Okay, and that's it. That's the whole construction. So how do we prove the security of this construction? Right, let me give you some intuition. So what we want to prove is that you look at any n minus 1 shares. They don't give you any information about S, right? So what happens if these n minus 1 shares happen to be the first n minus 1 shares? Then it's completely clear, right? First n minus 1 shares are anyway being sampled uniformly. We didn't even use the secret S for those. So maybe a slightly non-trivial case is maybe you're not given the first n minus 1 shares. Maybe you are given the last share and then n minus 2 of the remaining ones. So in that case, there's a little bit of work required, but the basic idea is that regardless of which n minus 1 shares you pick, they will always look like uniform strings to you, right? So these strings, in some sense, if you know about k-wise independence, these strings are n minus 1 wise independent. Anyway, we'll not use that fact. So let's try to prove the security from scratch. So the basic idea is we will show that any n minus 1 shares are uniform n minus 1 strings, and this is regardless of the secret. So regardless of you started with S or S prime, I look at these n minus 1 shares. This is just uniform distribution on the left as well as on the right. So identical. Okay, so let's try to go through two cases. Case 1 is our set is exactly equal to 1, 2 up to n minus 1. So let's make it an ordered set. Okay. So you are looking at the first n minus 1 shares. Then what we will say is that, so this is the trivial case. For every fixed string vector S1 up to Sn minus 1, this is small s. So I'm looking at fixed n minus 1 strings of the right length. What is the probability that capital Si equals small si for all I in 1 to n minus 1, such that capital S n, they are coming from the Sher algorithm. So what is this probability? So essentially, I selected n minus 1 strings ahead of time. And I'm looking at the probability that the first n minus 1 shares, they are exactly equal to this, these strings. And note that the first n minus 1 strings are chosen completely at random. So this is just equal to 1 by 2 to the power size of s whole to the power n minus 1. Right? Which is exactly equal to the uniform distribution. Okay, any questions? So here in this case one, I'm really just defining the uniform distribution again. So S is the length of each of these strings. There are n minus 1 strings. And hence, this is the probability of seeing any specific vector. Now, the second case, again, I'll do the same thing. I will try to compute. So in the second case, I is some arbitrary set of n minus 1 indices. Such that n is an element of I, which means the last share is included. And one of the earlier shares might be missing. And together, these two cases cover everything. So again, I can try to compute the probability. Si equals Si. So, okay. And this is for all I in capital I. And these shares are coming from the Sher algorithm. Right, this is what I want to compute now. And I want to conclude that this should be also the same. So what is this equal to? This is equal to the probability that Sn equals small sn and Si equals small si for all I in for all other I. Okay, so just breaking it into two parts. And then just again, so these capital S's are coming from the Sher algorithm. So what is capital Sn? This is actually equal to small s, which is your secret, and capital S1 XOR capital S2 up to capital S n minus 1. So we are looking at the probability that this is equal to small sn. Okay, and the rest remains the same. Okay. So say J is the missing share, which means that J is not an element of I. So then I can write this probability as probability that Sj is equal to small sn XOR S XOR capital S1, capital S2, and so on. And then rest remains the same. Okay. Now what is this probability? Note that Sj was chosen at random, and these are anyway fixed strings, and these strings are also chosen at random independent of Sj. So this part is just 1 by 2 to the power s, and again this part is 1 by 2 to the power s to the power n minus 2, which is 1 by 2 to the power size of s n minus 1, which is also the uniform distribution. So essentially all I did was I was given the nth share, and I was looking at the probability that this nth share is equal to a specific string, right? I translated that probability into the probability that the jth share, which was the missing share, Sj is equal to some specific string. And then I was back to case 1. Okay, any questions? And by the way, once we have shown that the n minus 1 shares are coming from the uniform distribution, this means that the distribution is actually independent of the secret that you started with. And hence, the left side as well as the right side should be identical. Okay, so this was a very simple construction. One of the disadvantages of this construction was that all the shares are very long actually, if your secret is very long, right? So let's say you start with a 1 gigabyte long file, you hire like 10 different cloud providers. On each of these cloud providers, you have to store a share which is also 1 gigabyte. Is there any way I can improve the construction? I can improve the storage requirement. And this is a kind of a nice, simple puzzle. So maybe I buy 1 gigabyte of space with only one cloud provider. On the other ones, the space can be something much smaller. There's a suggestion, PRG. How specifically are you planning to use PRG? Yeah, another suggestion, just split the key and store encrypted data. That's a good suggestion. Yeah, so what I can do is I have these many different cloud providers. I can encrypt my secret using some key K. And this key is of course very small, and I can just break this key into K1 to Kn, and these different shares of the key go to different cloud providers, and then this huge encrypted ciphertext, maybe I store it on the first cloud, right? And here the idea is that if, for example, even one of the shares of the key is missing, then basically you have no information about the key, and hence you cannot really decrypt the ciphertext. So to be able to use this this scheme, we are back to computational indistinguishability, because we have to rely on encryption, and encryption will require computational assumptions. Encryption cannot exist if P equals NP, or at least encryption where the key length is smaller than the message length. Okay, so this is one sort of nice optimization in practice. Now, another question is, what if some of the shares are unavailable, right? So maybe here you're also thinking about error tolerance, right? Maybe one of the cloud providers went out of business, or maybe the server crashed or something like that. And you want to set some threshold T, as long as so that as long as you have T shares, you should be able to recover your original secret. If you have less than T shares, then suddenly there's no information about the secret. So this is known as T out of N secret sharing scheme. T out of N. I can also write it as T out of N, or the same thing, typically we just write it as this. Secret sharing. And let's try to define T out of N secret sharing. Share algorithm is really the same. Share algorithm outputs N secrets, right? N shares. Now the reconstruction algorithm doesn't need all of these N shares. The reconstruction algorithm just needs Si for all I in some index set capital I. If the size of this set is greater than or equal to T, you output the secret. If there are not enough shares, output bot. Right? Reconstruction is supposed to fail in that case. What is the correctness requirement for all I such that size of I is at least T? Probability that reconstruction succeeds and gives you the original secret is should be 1, right? This probability is 1, regardless of which set you take, as long as the set size is large enough. Security refers to the case when the set I is not large enough. So for every set I such that size of I is less than T, again, we are looking at Si for all I in I such that S1 to Sn coming from the share algorithm this should be identical to the same thing except that your secret was S prime. Right, so it's a natural extension of the n out of n secret sharing scheme definition. So building T out of n secret sharing turns out to be a much more interesting problem. And let me try to explain to you one naive construction. So in the naive construction, let's try to just use n out of n secret sharing as a black box. And we will try to convert it to T out of n secret sharing. Okay. So here we have several parties, right? P1, P2, up to Pn, right? So let's deal with each set of T parties one by one. Okay. So what I do is I have S1 up to St, and let's call it 1. And we will use T of T secret sharing, the XOR based secret sharing scheme. So we take the share, we divide it into T parts using T or T out of T secret sharing scheme. And then we distribute this to the first T parties, let's say. Okay, so if the first T parties come together, they can reconstruct the secret, right? Now, what is the problem with this?
Just the size blows up. You get like exponentially large in the number of parties if you have like T's, say n/2 or something.
Yeah, I mean, even before that, the problem is, of course, only the first T parties can reconstruct here.
Oh yeah. If you were to do it for like every set of
Yeah.
T.
Yeah. So my solution to that, and you already pointed out a problem with the solution, but okay, let me talk about the solution, is that because only the first T parties can reconstruct now, let's take another set, right? Maybe leave out the first party in this, and S1. Let's generate a second collection of shares. And now give it to a different subset of T parties. So maybe S1 goes here and something like that. And you can keep doing this. So if you choose every subset of T parties and you repeat this procedure for every subset, right? Then basically this scheme works. But how many times do you need to run the T out of T secret sharing? So you need to do this basically n choose T times, right? If n and T are small, let's say constants, this is fine. But if n is like large, like 100, T is like 50, then this is huge. This is exponential in n. Right? So this is a naive construction, but unfortunately doesn't work in general. If n and T are pretty close, then actually this is fine, even if n is very large. So Shamir had a very nice solution to this problem, and that is known as Shamir secret sharing. And he's also the one who really started a formal study of this problem of secret sharing schemes. And he had a very nice scheme based on polynomials, which we'll look into. Okay, so before we look into the Shamir secret sharing scheme, let's recall some properties of polynomials. Okay, so polynomial 101. Some basic facts about polynomial. So suppose f of x is a degree D polynomial. Then we have the following properties. First property is, how do you define this polynomial? How do you fix this polynomial, right? So if it is degree D, then it would look something like the following. Equals ax to the power D plus B. Let me call these A0, AD, x to the power D plus ad minus 1 x to the power d minus 1 plus all the way up to a0. A0 is the constant term. So you can see that there are d plus 1 unknowns here, which you need to fix, and that uniquely defines the polynomial. So how do you define the polynomial? One option is you fix all these d plus 1 coefficients. But we will not do that. There's another way of defining the polynomial. Another way of defining the polynomial is you just fix d plus 1 points on the polynomial. So in other words, if this is what your polynomial looks like, I fix any d plus 1 points on this polynomial. Like let's say I fix f1, I fix f2, and let's say f d plus 1. Once I fix these values, the polynomial is completely fixed, as long as it's a degree d polynomial. Okay. So define just says that a degree d polynomial can be defined or chosen by choosing t equals d plus 1. Points. Okay, and there's a reason I'm calling d plus 1 to be t. In case of threshold secret sharing, this t will end up becoming our threshold for reconstruction. And one of the things to keep in, so yeah, as an example here, if your polynomial is a line which is a degree 1 polynomial, then you need 2 points to fix the line. If your polynomial is degree 2 or quadratic, then you need to fix 3 points on the y-axis and so on, right? And by the way, something important to keep in mind is that we are working in modular arithmetic. So in particular, we are working over finite fields. So something to keep in mind. Rather than mod n, let's say mod p, where p is prime, or a finite field. I don't really want to go into defining finite fields and so on. Let me just say that the difference between a finite field and group is just a group gives you a single group operation. On the other hand, a finite field gives you 2 different operations. Like let's say you need both addition and multiplication, then finite field gives you both of them. And clearly, when we are talking about polynomials, you need to multiply, you need to add. So you're really talking about finite field. But other than that, it's just everything is just mod p. That's it. The next property, which is really important, so as I said, once you fix these points, the polynomial is completely fixed. But what if I wanted to evaluate the polynomial on something else? Let's say here. Let's say I want to evaluate the polynomial on maybe not. Let me not talk about -1 because negative numbers don't really exist. But let's say here. This is let's say d plus 2. How do I do that? Right? In case I was working with the coefficient representation of the polynomial. If I know ad minus 1 and so on, I can just put x equals d plus 2, and I can get the value of the polynomial on that point, right? So that doesn't directly work if you are working with this different representation of the polynomial where you fix d plus 1 points. So how do we evaluate any other point on the polynomial? And this is known as interpolation, polynomial interpolation, right? So I'm sure that many of you have already looked at polynomial interpolation and what it is. So given t equals d plus 1 points, can reconstruct any other point of f of x using interpolation. Okay, so in other words, say you are given x1 f of x1, x2 f of x2, and xt f of xt, can compute f of x for any x. And how do you do polynomial interpolation? This can be done using Lagrange coefficients. So in other words, f of x will be the sum of Li of x times f of xi and I equals 1 to t. And by the way, this is a universal function. It's this function is public and independent of f. So just a linear operation. You take a linear combination of the existing values of f of xi, and that gives you the value on any other point. So this is known as this is an alternate representation of polynomials. So these Li's are Lagrange coefficients. And here's a third property which maybe you have not seen, you have not thought about before. And let me call this no reconstruction. If you are given less than t points. Okay. So what this says is that, let's say you are given x1 f of x1, and let's say x t minus 1, or let me write it as xd. Of course, you can imagine you cannot interpolate, but it turns out that every other point on the polynomial is maximally undetermined. What do I mean by maximally undetermined? Yeah, so let's say you're given these, let's say FD. So I know many points on the polynomial, right? And you might expect that slowly I'm learning the polynomial, I'm getting some information about all the remaining points as well. That is not true at all. So let's say I want to compute this point, right? Every value of this point is possible. This point could be here, could be here, could be here, could be here, anywhere, right? And because this actually follows from the define property, right? Because this is the last point on the polynomial, I can choose this point to be anything I want, and that would actually fix the polynomial. It would give me a valid polynomial, right? So this last point could be anywhere. So it's in some sense maximally undetermined. All possible values are possible and equally likely. So if you only have D points, then that's it. Those are the D points you have. You don't have any other information about any other point. And this is a nice property. As you can imagine, our security will sort of rely on this property. Okay, so now let's try to see how Shami secret sharing works. Any questions? And the basic idea is that in Shami secret sharing, right, you have a secret S which you want to share, and the secret must be part of the finite field. And in other words, it should be between 0 and n-1 or p-1 if p is your prime, the modulus. So what you do is you set f of 0 equals s. So the 0th point of the polynomial is your secret, right? And here I'm talking about T out of n secret sharing. Okay, and set the degree of f, which is D, to be T-1. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so I fixed 1 point. I need to fix D more points to define the polynomial fully. So for all I such that I is from 1 to D, choose Fi at random. Okay, so the remaining points required to fix the polynomial are chosen at random. So essentially what we are doing is we are picking a random polynomial subject to the constraint that the 0th point encodes the secret. Okay, and then your shares are for all I 1 to n, your share Si equals I and Fi. Okay. Note that you should not start from 0, because if you give out F0, then that's essentially your secret. Now, how do you recover the secret? And recovering the secret is just simple polynomial interpolation. Okay. If the size of the set is let's say t or higher, then you have t points on the polynomial. You interpolate to recover F0, which is also equal to the secret. So you just output F0. So there's a question, is there any other reason to use a finite field other than practicality? Is very good question. Yes, actually there is. The problem is this third property, no reconstruction, which is like maximally undetermined. So let's say I work with the infinite set of integers, right? In that case, if I am given like d points, and let's say my d points are in the range, the value of the polynomial is in the range 1 to 100 or something like that, and then I know the Lagrange coefficients, I have some idea that the f value on 0 cannot be like 1 trillion or something like that, right? So just the size of this f, just the magnitude gives me some information. On the other hand, in case of finite field, I can actually bypass this problem. In fact, how do you even pick a random number from an infinite set of integers? You cannot do that, right? You have to decide the size first. Yeah, so just for this trivial reason, we have to work with finite fields. Any questions? Okay, so now let's look at the proof. And the proof is actually essentially identical to the proof for XOR secret sharing. And again, we will have two different cases, right? In the proof, we want to prove that given t minus 1 shares, I have no information about the secret, right? And as you can expect, I will rely on this no reconstruction property. So what if I am given the first t minus 1 shares? If I'm given the first t minus 1 shares, then essentially I'm given the first d shares from 1 to d. And here Fi is already chosen at random, completely independent of the secret, right? So that case is fine. And again, I'm trying to prove that that given these t minus 1 values, these values just look uniform. They are coming from the uniform distribution, regardless of your secret. Okay, so if I'm given the first t minus 1 values, they actually are picked from the uniform distribution, so there's nothing to argue here. What if I'm given some other set of t minus 1 values? Okay, and from this set, I would argue that also, given the secret, I would argue that the first t minus 1 points can anyway be computed. Okay, so again, instead of looking at that t minus 1 set being equal to a specific vector, I can convert it into the probability of looking at the first t minus 1 points being equal to a specific vector, just like in the last proof. And then again, that probability will be straightforward. Then you are back to the first case 1. And the lecture notes have this proof, like the probability calculation. Okay, so let me skip that probability calculation because I also want to talk about something which is known as threshold encryption. Okay. So threshold public key encryption is something which is widely used in practice. And here the idea is that normally we think of a single encryptor and single decryptor, right? I want to encrypt something, I'm sending it to Alice. She has the key, she can decrypt, right? But sometimes you don't have a particular recipient in mind. Maybe you are encrypting a classified file, and maybe only some committee can open this classified file, right? Maybe you're encrypting some document for the Congress, and if the majority of Congress members are present, your document can be opened and otherwise not. So this is known as threshold public key encryption, where I have a set of decryptors in mind. If all of them are present, or maybe if a threshold number of them are present, only then my message can be decrypted, otherwise not. And threshold public key encryption can be obtained by sort of combining regular public key encryption and a threshold or Shamir secret sharing scheme. And even in blockchains, for example, threshold public key encryption is used all the time. Yeah, somebody is asking about threshold signatures. There also exist threshold signatures. Basically, you can consider a threshold version of almost all the primitives in cryptography. In threshold signatures, you receive a signed document. You can verify that this document was indeed signed by a threshold number of the committee members without actually learning specifically which committee members signed the document. And again, all of this threshold cryptography relies on secret sharing schemes. So let's see, let's look at threshold public key encryption. Let's first try to define threshold public key encryption, right? So the key generation process takes as input the security parameter. Let's call it K or kappa or something like that. It outputs a public key, and it outputs a set of secret keys, SK1 to SKN. Okay, and here we are talking about T out of N threshold public key encryption. So similar to secret sharing scheme, I can consider N out of N, where I need all the N decryptors to be present. Maybe I need threshold number of them to be present. I can set the threshold to be whatever I want as the encryptor, and that gives you T out of N threshold public key encryption. Okay, so now there's a public key, and then there are these N secret keys. If there are N decryptors, you can give the ith secret key to the ith decryptor. Encryption is the same. You just need the public key to encrypt your message. And this outputs a ciphertext C. Okay, and now here's the change. There's an algorithm which I'm calling partial decryption. This algorithm takes the ciphertext and the ith secret key. Okay, so essentially everybody receives the ciphertext, all the decryptors. I am the ith decryptor. I have the ith secret key. I can try to decrypt the ciphertext. I will not get back the message, of course. I will get back a partially decrypted ciphertext. Let me call it CI. Okay. And then finally, if a threshold number of decryptors release such a partially decrypted ciphertext CI, you can combine all of them and you can recover your original message. So we can call it recover or reconstruct. And here I need CI, where I is in capital I. Okay. If the size of the set capital I is large enough, higher than the threshold, then you output the original message M, and else this algorithm outputs bot. So correctness is what you would expect, right? I generated the keys honestly. I encrypted the message honestly. Then T out of N decryptors decrypted the message honestly. Then you apply the recover algorithm on the partially decrypted ciphertext honestly. You should get back the same original message with probability 1. Now, how do I define the security? Security says the following, that if only, let's say T-1 people decrypt the ciphertext, then by combining all these partial decryptions, you cannot get any information about the original message. In particular, by looking at this value, for every M0 and M1, you cannot even tell the difference between something which encrypts M0 versus something which encrypts M1. Okay, so essentially what I am looking at is you are given the ciphertext C and you are given SKI for I in capital I. And here the size of capital I is actually small. At most T-1. And the PK, of course. And then PK and SK1 to SK n coming from key generation. And then the ciphertext C encrypts M0 in this case. This is computationally indistinguishable from the same thing, except that you are encrypting M1 now. Okay. And note that I'm not including the partially decrypted ciphertext, only the secret key here. Why? Because earlier I was saying that given T-1 partially decrypted ciphertext, I cannot recover the original message. But now I am not giving this partially decrypted ciphertext. Okay, and the reason for that is that, I mean, given T-1 secret keys, anyway, you can recover T-1 partially decrypted ciphertext. So I can put it in here if I want, but it's not necessary because it can already be derived from SKI and C. Okay, and I can also define, by the way, multi-message version, which is more interesting. And so on. So how do we construct this threshold public key encryption?
You can split
Yeah, that's a good point. In this definition, in fact, because I'm only talking about a single message version, um, partially decrypted ciphertext might as well be the secret key, which is not the most interesting, but that's why I said the multi-message version is more interesting. So let me briefly write about the multi-message version where so another requirement is in some sense very informally. CIs shouldn't help the adversary decrypt another ciphertext. And the construction which we look at actually satisfies this property. Okay, so what any ideas for the construction? So one trivial construction is as follows. You can use any public key encryption. The key generation process uses any public key encryption in a black box way and just runs the key generation process of this given non-threshold public key encryption n times. And then your PK is just PK1 concatenation PK2 concatenation PKN and then you output PK and SK1 to SKN. So essentially like n different public key encryption systems running in parallel. How do you encrypt the message using this public key? Okay. So you run the Shami secret sharing scheme on the message M, and what you do is you encrypt the ith share with the ith public key. So you output PKI of SI for all I. Okay, so essentially the ciphertext contains n encrypted shares. Okay, and now if I am the ith decryptor, I look at the ith encrypted share and I just decrypt it. And that's my partial decryption. So if I have the ith secret key, I can recover the ith share and I output the ith share. And then recover is same as reconstruct of Shami secret sharing. if there's enough number of people sort of decrypting the ciphertext, then you have enough number of shares. And then you can just run the reconstruction procedure of Shamir secret sharing. Okay, so this is fine. A major downside of this is that your ciphertext size is actually very large, and even your public key size. Right, the encryptor is having to do a lot of work. Encryptor has to divide the message into many shares, encrypt each share individually, right? So size of the ciphertext blows up by a factor of n. There are better constructions. And there's one in the notes, which is based on Al-Gamal public key encryption. And the idea in that is the public key remains the same. There's just a single public key, and only the secret key changes. Only the secret key is, in some sense, secret shared. And it turns out in Al-Gamal, you can still decrypt and you can still combine the various partial decryptions. So we will look at this Al-Gamal PKE maybe next time. Okay, we will stop here, and I'm around for questions and office hours.